As always, I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of country. We're meeting on the land of the Gadigal, and I'd like to acknowledge any elders past, present, and any First Nations people with us today. So I have a few other things to remember that are on the slides. Oh, and there's a clicker. Who am I? I'm Estelle Grech. I lead planning and housing policy at the Committee for Sydney. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks also to our Innovation Fund partners. They're on the screen. We can't do the work that we do without them. And I have one other housekeeping, which is the Sydney Awards are coming up. And if you know a great change maker or if you've got a great project to nominate, please do. They close soon. You can scan this code to find out more, and hopefully you can join us on the night as well. And now I'm going to welcome our speaker. Edith, we're so grateful you could join us. Thank you. Edith Hsu-Chen is the Executive Director of New York City Department of City Planning. She was appointed to the position by the Mayor in January 2022. In partnership with the Chair of the City Planning Commission, she is responsible for setting and implementing the city's planning and development agenda, promoting inclusive and equitable growth throughout the 5 boroughs, and putting the city on the path towards a robust recovery from the global pandemic. One of her current priorities is to deliver on the administration's City of Yes. This 3-part modernisation of the zoning code will help New York City achieve carbon neutrality, expand economic opportunities, and provide housing for all. And that's what we're really excited to hear about today. So between 2008 and 2022, Edith served as Planning Director for the Borough of Manhattan. Throughout her career, she has implemented a multitude of plans focused on improving neighbourhoods as great places to live, work and play, and modernising New York's business districts to enhance their competitive edge. Edith holds a Master's in Urban Planning from Harvard Graduate School of Design and a BA in Design of the Environment from the University of Pennsylvania. And she started at the Department of City Planning as an intern in 1997, which is great. So I'm going to hand over to you, Edith. Thanks so much. There's going to be a presentation, and then if it's okay, I'll ask you a few quick questions, and then there'll be a panel discussion with some great people from Sydney to reflect on what you said. So thank you. Over to you.
Why, thank you. Thank you so much, Estelle. And thank you to the committee for the invitation to speak to you about City of Yes. I love talking about City of Yes. So really grateful for this opportunity, especially to hit a Sydney crowd. And I must say, I'm really impressed by the Committee for Sydney and your mission and your programming. I'm signing up. You've got some great events, but it's really wonderful to see the boosterism and the effectiveness of your group in furthering, in doing what's best for Sydney and putting it on its path. Okay, so City of Yes. Let me get to my PowerPoint here. Let me see, where did it go? Here it is. Okay, 1 second. There we go. Can you all see that? Uh-oh. Almost. Okay, well, that's bizarre. I see.
It's loading. Should be there.
It's loading. Okay. Okay. Well, I can just start talking. So I will say that what City of Yes is, it's the most comprehensive overhaul of New York City zoning resolution since its modern inception in 1961. I think New York is often credited for having the oldest zoning code in the States. Actually, not totally true, but we'll take the credit. It certainly has been the most far-reaching and impactful, and especially since we are the largest city in the nation. What City of Yes is, it's a huge overhaul because we realize that we have to address 3 major crises that we are faced with, that almost every global city is faced with. And that's number 1, climate change. Number 2, economic recovery. it's we could talk about COVID specifically, but really it's about making sure that we are ushering in new economy, making sure that we've got the right rules for new economy. And third is a dire housing crisis. We have a very severe housing shortage in New York City, and housing costs are through the roof. We need to address all these things, and it takes more than just Department of City Planning, of course. It takes so many actors, so many stakeholders, so many people who care about the city to move the needle on all this, and we're doing what we can. And of course, we make a lot of plans, we issue a lot of different policies, we change rules. Zoning is so powerful. It is the rule book for how New York City develops. What I've been calling it lately is a book of values. And every city that has zoning has this book of values. And do the rules and the regulations in the zoning resolution, is it going to create, is it going to strengthen, is it going to ensure that we're getting the city that we want? And City of New York, it's an open city, a dynamic city. It is a city where we want people to keep coming and to stay and to grow their families and to start businesses, to grow businesses, to live and be healthy. It's an incredible place, and we want to make sure that we're giving it all the tools it can in terms of what we are responsible for to make sure that we are allowing it to be the best that it can be through zoning. Okay, so have the slides loaded?
Yeah, they have, thanks.
Okay, terrific. And now I can see the room too. Hello, everyone. Okay, so let's see here. Some things, some examples of what zoning governs. I think you all know. You all are very sophisticated in how cities work. So I'm not going to dwell too much on pretty basic slides, but the City of Yes proposal is actually a set of three proposals. City of Yes for carbon neutrality, for economic opportunity, and for housing opportunity. We started this at the beginning of 2022, and we started out with studying carbon neutrality, and we sequence it this way: carbon neutrality, economic opportunity, and then housing opportunity. We started from the easiest to the hardest. We are right now in the thick of it for the public process, the public review process for housing opportunity. I'm so happy to say that City of Yes for carbon neutrality was already approved. That was approved last fall. And City of Yes for economic opportunity was approved just 10 days ago. And we are now in the thick of it, of the public review for housing opportunity. And what public review means in New York City is, we do a lot of outreach before we launch a project into something called ULURP, Uniform Land Use Review Process. And what that is, it's a formal time in which community boards, the borough president review a proposal and submit recommendations. The City Planning Commission holds a hearing and considers the proposal and votes, has a couple months to vote to come to a decision, and then it gets sent over to City Council. So that's the official public review process. But of course, we do a lot of stuff leading up to the official ULURP. Okay, so let's get to the next slide. First, on City of Yes for carbon neutrality. I said earlier that New York City zoning resolution was, its origins date back to 1961. This is long before people were talking about electric car charging. This is, long before, climate change, and we still have a lot of stuff in zoning that doesn't make sense. We want to make sure that our zoning can help buildings reduce their carbon emissions. Like with most major global cities, most of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from buildings. 2/3 in New York City is coming from buildings. We actually have a local law, a requirement that by 2050, we get to zero carbon, net zero. So, we've got an interim step. We're trying to reduce by 40% in year 2030, and we're trying to get to net zero by 2050. There's a lot to do between now and then. And there's a lot we need to do to help the buildings. So what do we mean by carbon neutral city? Again, you all know this, but we need to reduce our energy needs. We need to also decarbonize our power sources, our grid, and we need to make sure that we're getting our buildings and our vehicles electrified. But we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure for that, and we're allowing for buildings to retrofit quickly, efficiently, and less expensive. And we got to make sure we get zoning out of the way. So, we had, for example, until this proposal was put in place, a limitation on how much solar arrays you could put on your roof. There was a limit. You could only cover 25% of your roof with solar arrays. And, no one really knows the genesis of that limitation other than there's a lot of anecdotes where people thought they're ugly. Seriously, like people just thought, oh, they're like, it's not part, it's too foreign and alien looking, and this is not part of the cityscape. So there was this arbitrary, limitation put into place at 25%. I've been equating solar arrays to fire escapes. And there was a time when everyone decried the aesthetics of fire escapes, that you all may know on the tenement buildings in New York City. Now they're incredibly beloved feature. People use them as their, outdoor hangout space. But this was, this is very necessary infrastructure. Fire escapes back then, just as solar arrays are very necessary infrastructure now. We need to do a lot to change our zoning. That's just one small example. We need to make sure that we're creating space on our streets and in buildings for EV charging. We need to make sure our buildings can store energy so they can get them off reliance on the power grid. We need to do a lot of things. Hold on. So our City of Yes for carbon neutrality had 17 different policy points, and within these policy points, smaller policy points. But you can see, we were trying to decarbonize energy, buildings, transportation, and waste and water. And in our zoning code, we did a lot of things, including promoting whole new industries, like onshore, offshore wind. We're making sure that buildings can accommodate energy banks. We are also, I mentioned earlier, electric vehicle charging, and things like street trees and porous paving. Like we need to change our streetscapes so that we can have cooler streets, and make sure that every part of the urban landscape is contributing to getting us to carbon neutrality. So I said earlier this was the easiest of the lot of the three, and I think that was very much the case. Like barely any modifications were asked of us of the zoning proposed zoning code during the process. We did make some adjustments, but it was we were very happy and not surprised that we had a very strong vote by City Planning Commission and the City Council end of last year. Okay, so the next set of zoning changes, the second out of the three, is the City of Yes for economic opportunity. Now, during COVID, New York City, we lost over 950,000 jobs. We have already recaptured all those jobs and created more. People want to be in New York. Like it is jobs, businesses. It is just an incredible hub. It's just an incredible business center, a place to do commerce. But we need to do more to make it easier, especially for the smaller businesses, the mom and pops. I just want to make sure my slides are advancing. Are they advancing for you? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Okay. There's a lot of confusion in our, especially in our small business sector, about what you can and cannot do with respect to even establishing a business. Where can you establish it? How can you grow your space? What are your limitations per zoning? And because our zoning is relatively old, we have stuff in there such as I like to use this example: the Special Fifth Avenue subdistrict. I think many of you have been to New York City, Fifth Avenue, pretty, a glamorous spot to do shopping. It's a global destination for commerce. Believe it or not, there is a set of use groups of what kind of retail you can have here. It's just left over. And it's stuff like you can have a typewriter repair store, you can have an airline ticketing office, you can have a milliner. I mean, it was so specific and so bespoke. It was like trying to curate a particular kind of retail corridor. But a lot of those uses are gone. But why are we doing that? Why is the city of New York curating to that level of specificity in our zoning retail uses? We also had other limitations that just seemed rather arbitrary and just confusing. People didn't know, okay, I'm trying to grow my bakery in a residential neighborhood. I've got one, Edith, I have one in my neighborhood that's really wonderful. And they wanted to grow their business, to just to get more ovens to sell more baked goods. But they couldn't, because once they expanded by another 25 square feet, they would be considered a manufacturing category and no longer, a neighborhood amenity. There were just all these rules that were driving everyone crazy and really inhibiting growth of businesses, inhibiting some people from starting businesses, but also it wasn't reflecting the way that people are conducting business these days. We saw during COVID lots of people opening up businesses from home. And there were many businesses in home before COVID. People cutting hair, or or practicing law, or doing interior design. But again, the zoning code just had a lot of strange arcana in there, where you can make certain kind of foods, but not salsa. You can make jewelry, but you can't be, a certain kind of interior designer. I mean, it was really kind of crazy stuff. I'm giving some pretty extreme examples, but we wanted to make sure that we were making zoning that's much more flexible and much more capable of meeting the changes of how people are doing business. And it's not just about small business, it's also new industries. We have urban agriculture that we're trying to promote. We have a huge boon in life sciences, and want to make sure that they can be located in commercial districts, because right now they were relegated to really high density commercial and some manufacturing districts. But there's a lot of manufacturing these days that is perfectly clean and perfectly fine to be in mixed use commercial or residential. Like, manufacturing is not all about, the big soot and like gravel and, producing uses that we saw in the 1960s. Times have really changed. So our City of Yes for Economic Opportunity created, again, just happens to be another 17 policy points. We want to make it easier for businesses to find and grow, find space, grow. We want to boost growing industries. We also think it's very important to make sure that we are enabling business-friendly streetscapes. So as part of this proposal, we actually introduced corridor design rules to help better activate ground floors. We did see a lot of vacancies, a lot of store vacancies with COVID, and a lot of them are still that way. And we want to make sure that we have streets that people feel comfortable and safe walking on when they're, out to do business. We just want to make sure that we're streamlining all this. So we have, we've even created things like a waiver process for adapting certain uses, such as, film. Movie, television production has been a huge booming industry in New York City, but we had been hearing for years that it's very difficult to get the right kind of space. And to get permitting for those spaces. So this was a bit of a everything, like throw everything, at the problem solution. During the process, believe it or not, we did hear a lot of concern coming from stakeholders, community groups, particularly in the Queens and Brooklyn, Staten Island boroughs, that we were promoting commercialization of neighborhoods. We actually we weren't trying to do that. We were just trying to acknowledge that there are businesses at home now, and we want to acknowledge them and make it easier for them to get established and grow. And we did actually create something called a local store rule, where in neighborhoods where you couldn't open up a bodega, which is a New York corner store, we were going to allow it through a process, like still an authorization, but allow it in a pure residential district. Allow a corner store, provided that you have enough size for it, you're at a corner, and it goes through some sort of process. That actually was stripped out. That did not make it in the process. And that was quite surprising to me, because we thought, who would say no to being able to run out, at 10 p.m. because you need to pick up some milk and eggs. But, there was quite a big concern coming from many neighborhoods that this was, a gateway to many more commercial uses that they didn't want to see in their pure residential areas. So that's an example of something that actually kind of surprised me, at least, in terms of what would be the most controversial. Under this proposal, we did have to make modifications, and we were glad to. We got lots of feedback, lots and lots of feedback from community boards, from council members, and we like input. We want input. Instead of getting a no, or instead of, we encourage community boards and borough presidents, instead of just outright no, just give us feedback. Tell us what you do and don't like. We had these 17 proposals. Which of these are good for you? Which one not so much? So, we really wanted to get nuanced input from the stakeholders, and we were able to modify in a way that satisfied the city council. We were really pleased that they just approved this earlier this month. Okay, so the next one is the one I mentioned earlier, is the toughest one. And this one is probably the most impactful, the most urgent, maybe the most important, because we desperately need to create more housing in New York City. We are good at creating jobs. New York City doesn't seem to have a problem creating jobs. People are coming where it's really hard to find a home in New York City. The most recent housing vacancy survey showed that the available homes in New York City is at 1.4%. 1.4%. That means there's just not enough supply out there. And when you have a situation where folks don't have choice, that also means they have no leverage, and the power balance shifts dramatically towards landlords. And then we get situations where there's just, you get shoddy state of repair for a lot of homes. You have lack of mobility for people who may want to move around, and they may want to try different, go to a different school, or be closer to family or friends, but they can't move because there's no choice. We got also big societal problems. We have displacement, gentrification, homelessness. There are a lot of issues that can trace its root to the lack of housing supply. So we think it's really important to do all we can to increase housing supply. So our approach in City of Yes for a housing opportunity is that we have a citywide crisis. We need a citywide solution. So instead of identifying certain areas to develop more housing, to increase the density, boom, here, and here. We do that. We still do that, and we have done that. But these neighborhoods feel like they are shouldering the burden, for the rest of the city. And frankly, they have been. Like in New York City, we have 59 community districts. Of the 59 community districts in recent years, 10 of them, just 10 out of the 59, have outperformed the other 49. So we have a very unfair, inequitable, imbalanced distribution of where housing is getting created. So we need a citywide solution. So our approach for this is to Induce a little more housing in every neighborhood. In every neighborhood, whether you're low density, mid density, high density, whether you're old neighborhood, new neighborhood, we're saying every single neighborhood has to do its part to deliver a little bit more housing, because when we get a little bit more housing in every neighborhood, we're going to get a lot more housing across all of New York City. So, and what we're seeing with this proposal is that we are basically reintroducing building typologies, building types that people have loved for decades, but somehow weren't able to build. You know, our zoning through accretion also created so many problems where we basically effectively banned certain kinds of building types because we made it too hard to build, even though that's what we wanted to start out with. So let me give some examples. Oh, sorry, going back to some statistics. We used to be good at creating housing, you know, but that was 100 years ago. So in the 1920s, you know, 729,000, 2010s, 169. I mean, it's dramatic how little housing we're creating. And this is, sorry, I meant to show these slides earlier, that very, very uneven location of where new housing is being created. Okay, so let's get to our key proposals in City of Yes for housing opportunity. In the lower density areas, we're saying, okay, there used to be a time where people really liked having housing on top of like a one-story retail along like a main street in a neighborhood. And that was it was a very normal and popular building type, but it got harder to build over time because of other requirements that were put into place. For example, parking requirements. Really, you know, if you have to provide parking because you're adding units to a development, you know, there's where you're going to put the parking. You know, there's only so much land, and maybe it's probably not worth it. It's too much trouble. So we just saw basically you know, this whole line of housing production along town centers just turned off. So we want to turn that valve back on. Accessory dwelling units. Some people call these Fonzie flats, or I don't know what you call them in Sydney. But believe it or not, they're not legal in New York City to have a small cottage in your backyard or to have an apartment over your garage. This is an incredible way to deliver more housing that, frankly, there's a lot of it already. You know, some people are just built them, even though they're not legal. They're a great way to keep families together. You know, when your kid comes home from college, you know, they can live, you know, in the apartment above the garage, or instead of sending, you know, grandma to New Jersey, you know, the nursing home over there, like, you know, she can live in the cottage, you know, in the back. Or it could just be a nice way for property owners to generate some income. You know, whatever it is, you know, accessory dwelling units is something that we should be allowing in New York City. Another a big thing we've proposed for the medium and higher density districts is something called universal affordability preference. And that is an automatic bonus, 20% more development, more floor area, if that 20% is housing for affordable housing or senior housing or supportive housing. Now, some people say, well, how does that even work? Like, how does that pencil out? Well, we are very grateful the state is helping us out with that. The state has prepared packages for tax incentives to encourage developers to take advantage of UAP, or universal affordability preference. Okay, this is a big one for us. Really, really big one. We are proposing to eliminate parking mandates citywide. We are a transit-rich city. There's no reason why we should have parking mandates. We are not taking away anyone's parking. We're saying, listen, if this neighborhood, you know, needs parking over there, if this developer wants to provide parking, fine, do it. We're saying let the market decide. But why should New York City, why should we through zoning require parking? You know, frankly, we're behind on this. You know, there are other cities, smaller cities in the states that have already eliminated parking requirements. So, you know, here we are following Cambridge, Massachusetts lead, where I think Minneapolis has gotten rid of their parking requirements as well. We're also making it easier for campuses to add new buildings. And these are campuses that could be religious or educational, cultural, or just a large site that's over 40,000 square feet. Right now, we have these rules that make it hard to do infill development. I mean, this could be public housing campus. It could be a church campus. We're just, there's a lot of, there is land out there, right? There's land, but can you build on it? And we're making it easier to build on land that's right under our noses. That's already in these campuses, in these very urban campuses. We're also proposing to re-legalize buildings with small apartments. How people live is changing. There are folks who are happy to share, happy to share a kitchen with someone who's not in their family, or happy to share, amenities. I mean, any new development now, like, it just got to provide certain amenities. So we're making sure that's the case. And then another big one for us is we are facilitating the conversion of office buildings to housing. We do have, a vacancy problem in our office stock, primarily in Class B and C office stock. We saw a lot of flight to quality is what folks are calling it. The older buildings, businesses want to locate. They don't want to be in the older buildings that have older HVAC or are not as green or sustainable. Don't have amenities. We're seeing a lot of flight to newer buildings or retrofitted buildings, and people are working at home a lot, right? I mean, that's I don't think that's changing. We're seeing people more and more back in the office. Things are heaving, here at City Planning, maybe not at 7:40 p.m., but it's great to have people back in the office. But the way we all work now is different, and it's very normal to have work from home days. So we've got office stock out there, and we need to make it easier to convert that office stock. It is very, very difficult. It's very expensive to convert that space. It requires decanting a building, have no revenue roll for a while. It's challenging physically, the mechanicals, like we need to make it easier. So we are facilitating that through number one, allowing more buildings to convert, not having a cutoff of 1961 or 1977, which we're proposing that we bring that the buildings all the way up to 1990. And then again, the state has been really great on this. New York State has proposed a tax abatement, tax incentive to help offset the cost of converting a building. And something that we're really excited about is that through rezonings, where we're going to do some upzonings in areas that have office buildings, we will also be for the first time, we'll be able to secure affordable housing units in office conversions. So, these changes I think, are really necessary to reflect, with the situation we're in, which is a desperate housing crisis, a very dire housing crisis, but also, there are other realities that we just need to make sure are reflected, in our book of values. For example, one that's not on this chart is like we have this crazy rule in zoning. And again, it dates back to 1961, and just imagine life back then, right? It was just different, right? And this is before the height of the civil rights movement in the States. And we have even rules that talk about who can live in the same housing unit, and they have to be familial relations, either by marriage or blood. And you look at New York City, you're like, oh, really? So there's a lot we need to do to fix our zoning. And it's not to say that we have not been making modifications or changes, in the past 60 plus years. We have been. We really have been. And there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of changes over the years, but we've never done something as far reaching and as expansive as City of Yes. And we're really, really We're really ready to go on all of this. So again, we're in the third one. We're in the City of Yes for housing. This one I said is the toughest because I think the NIMBY movement is the toughest opposition out there in terms of housing. It is great to see change though. Like the YIMBY movement, Yes in My Backyard, is quite strong and getting stronger. And we are seeing across political spectrum, across disciplines, an acknowledgement that we have a lot at stake here. And if we do not do something to fix our housing crisis, everyone's got to do its part. We're really facing this is an existential crisis. What is New York City if it's not open and accessible and dynamic and a place for opportunity, a place where you can come here and grow here and succeed? So we're doing all we can through this very powerful tool of zoning, and we're very hopeful that it will pass by the end of this year. Okay, so that's my presentation on City of Yes, and I welcome your comments and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edith. Conscious that it's quite late for you, so if it's okay, if we could ask one or two questions, or how much time do you have? Cool.
I'm fine on time. Don't worry. Yes.
I might kick off for one, and then I'll go to the audience, but it has to be a real burning question. And no comments. So have a think. But I guess when I saw City of Yes, it's so comprehensive, it's so far-reaching, and thank you for your presentation, both comprehensive and far-reaching as well. But I also found it really hopeful. The way that it's been framed, like a city, yes to dancers and makers, and yes to families, and even like the drawings that you've got in the document, they're quite nostalgic and hand-drawn, and there's a lot of feeling in there. And I guess, could you give us a little insight into the strategy around the way that it was framed? Because it is really hopeful, and did it work? Like, were people more receptive because of the framing?
Oh, I love that question so much. Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, people are responding to it. I mean, we're so happy about that. What we found is that this stuff is so important, and we wanted people to really feel that they could get into it and get familiar with it. And zoning does, it has a bad reputation. It's very technical. It's very wonky. Like, who understands it? It's so complicated. But we really want people to really dive in and see, that this stuff is important and really affects their lives. So number one, we decided to brand it, and which is new for us. We don't normally brand, our zoning proposals. If we do, they're usually pretty wonky names, like mandatory inclusionary housing, or like zoning for quality and affordability. But this is just a straight City of Yes. And it's been so effective since the mayor unveiled this tagline at a speech 2 years ago. We want to be exactly that, the City of Yes. This is what New York should be. And it's been really helpful to have this kind of communication out. And thank you for making that point about the watercolors. This is not, soft images, kind of nostalgic. This is not the stuff that we usually put out, right? And people, when they think New York, they aren't usually thinking images like this, right? They're thinking big shiny towers. But New York is a lot of this too. We have a lot of neighborhoods in New York, and New York is also a lot of this. And we also have a lot of missing middle housing. And we wanted to show people, like, the stuff that we're trying to promote is stuff that's already there, but we haven't really, like, the development community hasn't really been able to develop it because of XY reason, a lot of it zoning. So we did, we made a very concerted effort to make sure that we're communicating in a way that people could feel more at ease and not intimidated to, jump in and participate in this conversation.
Thank you. Anyone brave enough to ask a question in the room? No? Yeah, okay.
Hi, Edith. David here.
David?
Yes. I have a quick
I don't
question
know,
for you.
David.
I got a tricky one for you.
Okay.
If assuming that you're increasing the amount of housing, you're increasing the population as well, right? So arguably there's more schools and more open space needed. How are you addressing this other broader amenity needs that are needed in there?
That's a great question. And everyone, full disclosure, I know David from way back from grad school. Very happy to see you, David. Um, okay, so that's a great question because everyone, the first question that we get a lot when we're in our community is like, well, what does this mean for my sewers or my schools or my, streets? And aren't we at capacity already? Like, I don't even. What this proposal allows us to do through a very comprehensive environmental impact statement, we are taking a citywide look at our needs. And we know we're going to have to do something, right? Like there are going to be capital expenditures that are coming out of this proposal, but they're going to be informed by where the needs are because we've done a very comprehensive EIS, environmental impact statement. It's currently still in draft. It doesn't get finalized until we get out of this process, but it's kind of an amazing opportunity, right? When is the last time we've done something like this? I don't know if we've ever done something like this. So yeah, we're prepared to make changes, in the infrastructure. This has been an all agency, all hands on deck effort. And it's, not without some like white knuckles and like gnashing of the teeth because it's a lot. It's a lot. But at the same time, like, we've always, wanted to be a growing city. We are a growing city. We're at 8.5 million right now. So, there was a time, that we were projected to be well past 8.5, at this time. So, I think that we're not flat-footed about it, but we certainly acknowledge that there are going to have to be changes in certain areas to accommodate the growth.
Thank you. Time for one last question? Anyone? Yep. Okay, cool.
Oh, can I just say one more thing on that point?
Sure.
So yeah, we do want the growth. We like it. I think a growing city is a dynamic city, but also this is about relieving pressure off of individuals and people who are looking for homes because we have a lot of people doubling up, tripling up, quadrupling up. We want people to have choice of homes. So this actually isn't really about increasing the population. This is about increasing the housing supply. So with increased housing supply, we're going to, I think, yes, more people will come to New York and that's great. But this really is about acknowledging that we need to put in some relief right now for the folks who just have no choice.
Thank you.
Hi, Edith. My name's Stephanie Bond-Hutkin and I work in the solar industry. So really excited to see all of the effort that you were doing towards increasing the amount of solar on roofs. Slightly different question though, and it's around heritage. So we have that problem here in New South Wales, particularly in Sydney, with big heritage areas that are being looked at with the SEP and the TODs at the moment. What are you doing in New York City with heritage and increasing housing and making that connection?
Your question is unbelievable with respect to timing, because just this morning I was on another panel about housing and historic preservation. And they traditionally, have been like this. That's the reputation. The reputation is that preservationists are not pro-development, that preservationists are not like housers. And I think there are a lot of leaders in the preservation field who are really trying to change that, and it's incredible to see it. For example, today, the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation, it's a federal agency. They convened this roundtable that included City of New York, not just Department of City Planning, but also City of New York's Landmark Preservation Commission, and also the state's Historic Preservation Office. And there were some others at this roundtable. Also professor at Columbia on preservation. And it is really wonderful to hear, that there's an acknowledgement that the toolkit for preservation needs to evolve. and it's a little bit limited right now with respect to, our local law for our Landmarks Preservation Commission really does circumscribe its jurisdiction and mandate to appropriateness, literally the word appropriateness, and that's based on the physical, assessment and merit of what it looks like, and there's just much more and more talk about how you need to preserve more than that. We need to preserve also, like, communities and culture. And so, you're seeing toolkits and language, I'm hearing just a change, and it's very, very encouraging. And, it's not to say that preservationists or that have been traditionally or always opposed to development, or that's just not the case. Like we see a lot of adaptive reuse. Just a couple years ago, we did a big rezoning of Soho and NoHo. These are cast iron districts, mostly covered by historic district designation. There was a big rezoning there that introduced mandatory affordable housing. So things are changing. There's still more to do, for sure. But I think we are at the time right now where if we don't talk in very honest terms about what's at stake, we're not going to be the New York that we want to be. And so, sometimes it really takes a crisis, to really, move the needle. But we're hoping to more than move the needle. We want to make real huge changes here. Thanks for your question.
Is it quick, Amy? Okay. And one last quick question. Thanks so much for your generosity, Edith.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hi, this is Amy Nadaske. I'm a native New Yorker, so it's really warming to hear all of this great change. I know. You spoke about the success because this is an all-of-agency, all hands on deck. Stakeholders, as humans, we get in the way of great change all the time because of ego or protection or territorialism. Do you have any quick tips or success stories or things that we should learn to bring people together to move things along faster?
I think a big thing is public engagement. Go often, go early, go at it, like just keep doing it. We just started at city planning. Like we thought we were doing a pretty good job, like all this time. I've been at city planning 25 years. We thought we were doing a pretty good job, with public engagement. But boy, we really should have and could have been doing more. And we're in a time now, of course, like the public demand that too. Like you need to make sure that you're providing those opportunities for meaningful input rather. And that it's not just like, oh, check that box that went to the community board. But I think it's been very meaningful to the stakeholders, to the community boards, to council members, to see that when they give us input, when they go, and it's not just a straight no. It's not, they're giving us their thoughts, and that we can make adjustments, like, and we want to get to a yes where you have it's yes, it's win. So there are some things that we may, that we feel are non-negotiable, but really, like, there's room to make adjustments. And it's really been helpful to us, and we've been gaining credibility along the way, even though we're in the hardest one right now, City of Yes for housing. But because we've made modifications, we heard we also went out, we did literally hundreds of meetings with community boards. We just, kept saying, yes, we'll meet with you, like civics, stakeholders, you name it. It's really been a huge part of our ability to move forward and hopefully to success on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick extension of that question. How long did it take to do from initiation to where you are now? Like how many years ago did this start?
Well, when the Mayor Eric
Mhm.
Adams came into office at the beginning of 2022, and he has 5 deputy mayors. One deputy mayor is Maria Torres Springer. She's the deputy mayor for economic development and workforce, and housing as well, of course. And she put it to the agencies, to um, put forward their like best, most important ideas. And so this has been in the works for over 2 years. Um, it's but I have to say, like, it's been something that planners have wanted to do for longer, for even more years. And so credit, to this administration and to our deputy mayor for, being so bold to let us be so bold. Um, this is it's not easy stuff to propose like massive overhauls of regulations, and really, really grateful that we have the support of the leadership and the support across the city family.
Well, thank you so much, Edith. You're welcome to Sydney anytime. One final round of applause.
I've been and I loved it. And I'll go again, gladly. And I have family there too.
Okay, great. Well, thank you and enjoy your night.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. Appreciate it. Okay. Good morning to you all. Good night to me. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night. Well, now I'm going to invite, I guess, sort of the equivalent lady in New South Wales, Monica Gibson, to the stage. Hopefully she needs no introduction, but she is the Deputy Secretary of Planning, Housing. Oh, it's plushy. Yeah. What is it? Land use planning. Housing and infrastructure. Plushy. Yeah. Best acronym ever.
Best acronym.
And Bill Dowzer from BVN as well. We've uncovered that we've got 2 Novocastrians having a chat. And I need my questions.
Newcastle's definitely a city of yes.
This works.
Yeah, I think so. I need to turn it on. First question is just like, what were your reflections on that? I imagine there were quite a few synergies.
Edith is my kin. I just feel so uplifted being a planner today and that conversation. So many things from the technical part about land use definitions that are just out of control. Having spent 10 years on the front counter of a council answering duty planner inquiries on what fits into what term. I think we had typewriter manufacturing probably in our LEP for a while too. All the way through to the focus on the families, the focus on the affordability, the focus to that community building, which I feel like as a planner, we're trying to connect all these dots together, but that's the ultimate goal, is to bring those families together. I'm in a family mood. One of my sisters had a baby overnight, so I'm in the family mood.
Yeah. And Bill, like, any reflections from your perspective as well?
I just think it's been interesting because I went to New York 2014 and set up the BVN office there until 2020. And so having gone through that experience and seen how draconian planning was originally and how it changed, like the pandemic actually changed things. And one of the big things was all sorts of things that just dropped. And that sort of city of yes thing represents very much a sort of mindset in terms of, getting rid of obstacles, and people actually just do it anyway. And then often the legislation catches up with it in New York. Like there's a difference in terms of, they don't follow rules. No one will follow a rule, and you'll actually deliberately break it until you're actually told that you're not allowed to do it. So it's kind of interesting.
And I guess the second part of my question is, do you think Sydney's in the same headspace? Like, are we ready for yes, Monica?
Look, I think there was some reporting today that it's a city of maybe 50% yes. And I think that we
have a shared understanding about what the challenge is in housing. I think there are some parallels with the work that might be happening in the planning for a resilient city, planning for economic renewal and change. And we might have moved through some of those reforms in the same way that New York's moved through some. We've got some gaps, but I think we've been through a fair bit of that reform too. And I, flippantly said Newcastle's a city of yes. I think lots of parts of New South Wales are already the city of yes, particularly if you're in any part of regional New South Wales. It's very much a yes community. I was in Wagga with every shop in front in a 2-kilometre main street activated last week, and that's just phenomenal to think when we have a lot of retail challenges in different parts of metropolitan New South Wales to see how regional New South Wales responds as well. So we're thinking about where are places of yes. Also think to regional New South Wales.
No, I agree with that. I think that sometimes it's easier. And in fact, that's probably one of the things about New York too, because you've got smaller districts and smaller boroughs that actually have more independence, which means that they can actually do more within that realm rather than necessarily having to be part of something larger where you're going to affect something that's more impactful. And one of the things for us was there's a program. So one of the things that happened during lockdown was we actually started a business called Reply in New York, which is actually outdoor, which was actually taking the plywood and reusing it that was boarded up shop fronts when George Floyd was killed. And we went straight to fabrication and to restaurants, which is now, that was a program that was done for the pandemic to allow restaurants to open up in the car parking bays out the front of them so people could operate safely. It's now just been brought in by the city as a permanent thing that's going to be seasonal every year. And it's really interesting how, you respond to the need at a time of need, but you actually learn from it and you don't go back to the way that you used to do things.
Something that I thought was really powerful from Edith's reflections was, we want people to say yes, but we'll also listen to them and we'll modify our proposals and we'll adapt and change. And I think, like in Sydney, I remember there was a headline around, government giving into council demands on low to mid-rise. And I was really disappointed in that headline because isn't it a good thing that you're working together and listening and adapting? And do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I really like the way Edith presented that on one slide about the timeline that it was taking for the proposals to come through. And typically in New South Wales, we would talk about kind of preparation, community engagement, finalisation. But instead, Edith talked about it in terms of engagement and development of the proposal. And then there was kind of this statutory part at the end. I think we do a lot of that in New South Wales, but perhaps we haven't captured that in the terminology. We're constantly seeking feedback, engaging, being here, being in other rooms and hearing those those voices and in that development stage of policies and proposals. So I think we could also do a little bit in kind of reshaping how we even explain what we're doing and show it on a slide that like that. It's a note that I've made for myself to take back to work.
It's interesting, that whole sort of idea of co-owning the problem though. Like that for me is the thing around the NIMBYism, or the sort of is that everybody, it's not just one agency that has to solve this problem. It's actually how does these problems aren't going to go away for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really liked Edith talking about those proposals joined up as well. So while we might have similar types of roles, some of that responsibility around leading the policy development on energy efficiency or leading the policy development around economic development change might not be in the same agency that I'm in. So I think that is something else to do, is to be a little bit more joined up in those conversations, and we could do that. That's the shared piece and the interaction.
Yeah, which I think is what I really loved about the proposal. Like, rightfully, your team has been moving mountains when it comes to housing, but I guess how does that interrelate with, the need to get to net zero by 2050, the need to modernise like economic land use zoning stuff? And do you think that there's space now that you've ticked off a lot of things to kind of also focus on the green stuff and the economic stuff as well?
Yeah, I think, and what Estelle's referring to there about the TOD program for transit-oriented development in New South Wales, the low and mid-rise housing and what that means across New South Wales, doesn't immediately read as move towards carbon neutral, carbon zero, net zero in New South Wales, but it fundamentally is. The alternate, which would be more greenfield housing and growing Sydney out and more streets in every suburb heading west, south, north. It's been a deliberate policy response to not do that in the same volumes that were happening. There certainly is a diversity of housing need across New South Wales, but to focus in on the missing middle, as the phrase that Edith used, or the low and mid-rise, to focus in around where infrastructure already is, that moves towards more walking. I thought it was really interesting in Edith's presentation, the focus on cars and car parking. I think we're probably talking a little bit more about our walking and our walking life. Bill, you told me when you were in New York, it's 20,000 steps a day. I feel like, we're trying to get to something where we've got a little bit more of a walking life in the choice that we can have in New South Wales. And as part of that, that means that we're greening, we have good footpaths, we have activity that's happening there, the parks nearby, all those range of things that we want to do every day are really nearby to us, and that we want to use them and choose to use them. So I think it's it might not immediately seem like the move towards a carbon neutral community, a carbon neutral society, but it really is at the essence of what we're doing in those housing reforms.
Yeah, the thing that I found really interesting in Edith's thing was that she actually talked about it being a set of values. Yeah. And I think that actually then that changes sort of it from sitting within separate entities, which is kind of interesting. And the other one, things that David's comment about infrastructure and schools is that, and having been involved in a lot of the urban schools guidelines with schools infrastructure, looking at urban schools, we still have a problem with the idea that maybe a school could actually have residential on top of it. And that is actually, like there are big sites that government could show some more, there are the opportunity to be able to sort of look at housing and how we can put it in, how we mix up the mixes of building types. And the other thing is a school really can be a tenancy. A school doesn't actually have to be an owned thing. It's just that the access and then the shared uses of being able to borrow public amenity and outdoor space and those sort of things and become part of the infrastructure of the city is important.
Yeah, the asking why all the time, I think, is a really important part of our early conversations. The asking why a typewriter manufacturer is the use that's permitted in, Fifth Avenue. Asking why about some of those decisions on 25% rooftop solar, and when there's not a good answer, it's the right time to be changing it.
Before I go on, any questions from you guys? Or I can give you more time to think of a few. No, just chilling. What day is it? Friday? Sorry. God, it's been a week. Yeah, I guess I was really interested in, there were so many similarities. And during the pandemic, we also, New York sort of went through COVID during winter and it was summer for us, but then we got to sort of copy a lot of the innovations that they did. So that's sort of partly where the Funcept came out of, and the push to al fresco dining and all that sort of stuff. And at the committee, we've been thinking a lot about how do we make more space for creative floor space and that sort of thing. Is there appetite to look at taking stuff like the FunCEP even further and making it even easier for creatives and entrepreneurs to operate in Sydney?
Look, I mean, when you have something called a FunCEP, I mean, that's what you want to be known for and keep doing things that are fun. Some of you might have heard about a cultural CEP, which maybe isn't the funnest name and might have to figure out a funner name for the cultural CEP. But to take that into makers, creators, to look at how that vibrancy that we so enjoy and appreciate, the opportunities that we have in New South Wales with great climate, diverse places, can be preserved, enhanced, and new places created. So that's an area of policy reform that's happening at the moment. Planning is working very closely with Minister Graham's portfolio, the 24-hour commissioner. And so, there's quite a bit there. I really want to know from Edith's presentation why you can have a bar but not dance. I really want to know what those planning controls are that don't allow you to dance in a place where you can drink, because that seems like be incredibly difficult to police.
We had the ban on disco balls for a while as well, so,
The disco ball provisions in planning controls do come up frequently in my team's conversation.
Anything from you guys? Very quiet. Were you just absorbing the preso?
Just in response to sort of the re-legalization or the incentives to allow like those sort of older housing typologies or allowing small co-housing to exist. Are we going to see anything of that sort of similar ilk, given that especially in Sydney we have the wonderful apartment design guide and those kind of similar bits of legislation that make it that there's a certain type of house that's very much incentivized, but there's a whole bunch that might suit newer demographics that just don't exist and are basically punished in terms of procurement?
Yeah, look, we have not that long ago introduced provisions for what we call co-living. So that's the term we would use in New South Wales, where it's shared amenity, shared services. Why does everyone need a laundry? I know that, kitchens often come up. I think I probably am always going to need a kitchen, at least the microwave, but I can do without the laundry and share that with somebody. So there are some provisions. I don't see that there's not a lot, and you're right, there's not a lot of activity happening in that space. Maybe in some like student accommodation, maybe in some seniors living, so like kind of specialised types of housing. And so it's worth us investigating why more of that isn't occurring, and if we've got the settings right to encourage and incentivise that.
Plus, I guess really passionate about the ADG, but I think sometimes the problem is not the guide itself, but people forget that it's a guide.
Oh yeah. Oh, that comes up every day too. Yeah.
So I guess how do we foster a culture among planners that you can say yes to things if it goes against the ADG, but cultural changes are harder as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a conversation with somebody last night talking about planners and the planning industry, and I said, look, it's one of those things that's almost ingrained in us, that the seriousness or the significance of decisions that we make. And so saying no seems to be the safer bet than saying yes. That's the culture change that I think people like Edith are leading, the clear message of City of Yes. It's a sense within the broader community for that. I think in the way that we use an apartment design guide, in the way that we are offering advice to people when they're proposing developments, when we're giving advice to clients, whatever that might be, that positive framing, and let's look to the opportunity. We can work through the things that aren't quite right. One of my earliest planning failures was this very large illuminated KFC bucket and in around the corner from my mum. So I had to see it all the time. I'm like, oh, I really wish I hadn't done that. But also, it's not fatal. So lots of people enjoying that KFC.
Questions from the applicant side, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because I think that there is a different mentality in New York in terms of that thing about yes and no. They're two different, cultural. I think there's actual cultural links in that, and everything that we end up doing becomes you're going down this planning line that actually is what's avoiding the risk and how can we actually get it through. And you don't want to challenge a lot of things because it's actually. We don't have a reward-based society potentially around innovation. We actually, stay within your lane and don't necessarily go out of your lane. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity for us to change in terms of that. And that's actually then to showcase where people have actually done good things so that it's not just always defaulting, like, the ADG being a guide. Yes, it's a guide, but everyone does it now. So it's like, and you don't, nothing is, there is starting to be some showcase things around how you show innovation in terms of thinking about new problems. And co-living in New York was actually really quite big in terms of it came out of co-working. WeWork actually had co-live. There was a whole lot of other ones that were actually developing a co-living products. And there's an entrepreneurial thing around startups and scalability and stuff that I think that we can adopt a lot of that here.
Can you share your anecdote quickly, Bill, about what everyone was talking about in Sydney in cafes and then New York?
Oh, yeah. When I left in 2014, it's about property prices here. And when you arrive there is what startup have you done and what are your failures? What are your celebrated failures? And it's like, if you felt like a real loser because you hadn't actually started 3 companies and done something and tried to break or disrupt in terms of the opportunity. So it was culturally so different in terms of that. But interestingly, Australians do really well in that realm because there's a lot of really interesting companies, a lot of really interesting organisations that are actually Australian based that are actually doing great stuff in New York.
Probably time for one last question.
Hi. I just had a question around I guess adaptability and flexibility and how policy might support these changing needs into the future and encourage this complexity and richness to kind of remain and evolve over time.
It's a really interesting question. And I might give a couple of examples, maybe one about how detailed planning and zoning is and how much time we spend down in this minutiae of definitions and where commas are and the legalese of planning. And I think that we need to contemplate why we have that, and I would really like to see some relaxing of that to go to much broader terms to allow people more flexibility in uses and where they occur. We're not dealing with tanneries and, like really dirty, messy, smelly things in our urban environments in the way that the planning controls were set up to do. So I think there is a piece there in that space. The other way that I wanted to talk about it was a little bit on that heritage place and that question about heritage and the relationship with particularly housing, but like it's all sort of development change and community change. And I feel maybe I would phrase things a little differently to Edith. I think housing and heritage have been together and intertwined for so long. Those things are very much connected, and there's real complexity around that. And that's something to celebrate and to start from in terms of these conversations. But the bit that I really did agree with Edith was that it's not just buildings. It's the communities, it's the culture, and making sure that we're not losing that complexity when we're trying to simplify things down to protecting the built form from a heritage perspective. So I think there's it takes longer to deal with things that are more complex, and we should sit with that and talk about that more and make sure that we're not trying to rush to an answer where there's a bit more complexity involved. But to make the system more flexible where we can would be my aim in life.
Well, that is all. I'm going to thank you both so much for your time and hand over to Eamon for a final vote of thanks.
Oh, thank you,
So thank you.
Adele. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Monica. It's such an interesting conversation. Thank you to Edith as well for joining us, who's not there anymore, but thanks in absentia. What an interesting conversation. My name is Amy Waterford. I'm the CEO of the Committee for Sydney. Thank you for coming along. I think it's really interesting. The panel talked quite a lot about the idea that this was a based on sort of a cultural shift, or that it was, thematic, or it was based on kind of a set of ideas, the idea of a city of yes. I go further. I'd say I think this is genuinely an ideological set of principles, and we often shy away from ideology because we think, well, we're not ideological. We're rational, we're sensible, we've got clarity and just doing the right thing. But like this sort of ideology of saying like, hey, we want things to happen, really is helpful in sort of helping flow through the decisions you make and the risks that you take and the way that you approach challenges. Because I think, so often in these spaces, we start from like, no, but maybe, instead of like, yes, unless you can come up with a really good reason why not. The committee's really excited. Committee's really excited to be doing this stuff. We're passionately yes people. In our backyards for so many things and so many of the things that New York is doing. So thank you for coming along. I just have one church notice for you, which Estelle mentioned at the beginning, the Sydney Awards. Give you a little bit more detail. The awards nominations close next Friday, so you've got a week. We're doing them a bit different. We've been doing the awards for 3 or 4 years now, but this year we've got new awards categories, and they're kind of equivalent to the Australian of the year. We got the Sydney Sider of the Year, we got the Young Sydney Sider of the Year, and we got the Unsung Hero and the Project of the Year. There'll also be a People's Choice Award. We're partnering with the Daily Telegraph on the awards, and they will run a public voting process for finalists across the other award categories for like the People's Champion, the People's Choice. So it's like a big deal. It's going to be like the opportunity to nominate someone as the best person in Sydney for the next year, and the best young person in the city, and the person you've never heard of. So really have a think about who your nominations could be. They don't have to be super detailed. We've got a great judging panel. We can't tell you who it is, but we will tell you soon who's on the judging panel. It's a cracking group of people that are going to be assessing the nominations, and then the awards are on the 12th of September. So it feels like it's like a short time frame, but once you realize you've got to do all this stuff between getting nominations and actually announcing the winners, it's not that long. 1 week to go. Chuck your nominations in. Thank you all for coming. Oh, and BVN, my God, thank you so much for having us. Like, we love being at BVN. I mean, this is, this space is a character in the play that is events like this, right? Like, you have a different conversation because you're sitting in this amazing space, and we love the work that you do and the philosophy that you bring, the ideology maybe that you bring to your work that helps shape conversations like this. So thank you to BVN. Round of applause for them. Thanks. See you later. Have a good day.